Hi, everyone. Welcome to Healthy Relationships. I said I was going to do it. I'm a woman of my word. And I'm really excited. I put together this presentation for all of you, and I hope it answers some of the questions I've been getting. So let's just crack into it. First of all, who am I? Why is this happening? What even is this? Those three questions you ask yourself in the mirror every morning. But I do want to kind of introduce who I am and what I do. My name is Sarah, and I work for Turning Point Domestic Violence Services. I'm on the prevention team there. I've been with Turning Point for about a little over 3 years now, which is like weird to think about. Uh, and I put this presentation together for all of you. A big part of my job, well, kind of backtrack. I have one of those jobs where it takes like a whole paragraph to like explain what I do. So Turning Point is a nonprofit agency that helps people who are experiencing violence due to intimate partner violence, which we'll get into, like domestic violence, dating violence. We are the agency that people in our counties can come to receive services. But I don't work with clients. I don't work in our shelter, which is a fantastic and free program for people who need it. I'm not a social worker. That's not what I do. I work in prevention. So a part of my job is teaching people the awareness piece, what abuse is, what those red flags are, what to look out for. But the bigger part of my job is teaching people how to have healthy relationships, because healthy relationships are the number one way that we prevent and eliminate domestic and dating violence. So I teach people about what healthy relationships are, how we can have them, and how we can hold each other accountable. So I work primarily with young people, middle and high school age students, teaching them about healthy relationships, teaching them how to prevent these things from happening. And when I think about myself when I was that age, no one came into my classroom and taught me about healthy relationships. And as a survivor of dating violence, sometimes I wonder if I had that knowledge, would things have been different? But I don't dwell on that because that doesn't really change anything. You know what I mean? So whenever I go into a space, I know how valuable this information is, and I recognize that a lot of you who might be watching this have never gotten this education as well, and it's crucial. It's critical. So what even is this? This is your chance to kind of open up your worldview, to learn something that maybe you haven't learned before. I'll be honest though, this kind of stuff has like taken off on the internet. People like to act woke about it, like no one's talking about this. Yes, they are. I talk about this all the time. Um, and I just see a lot of misinformation about not only my job and what I do, but the truth when it comes to intimate partner violence. And I use that phrase a lot just because it encompasses all relationships and all people. And I'll kind of explain what that means. So I do want to give a content warning. I always try to give a content warning before I present. Self-care is crucial and it's critical. And I teach coping skills and I talk about self-care. So if that's something you want to learn more about, let me know. But you are so important. And the number one healthy relationship you'll ever have is with yourself. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. So understanding that this content can be heavy. I mean, I am talking about abuse, which can bring up some things if you've ever experienced trauma. So understand your boundaries. I love talking about boundaries. It's one of my favorite things. But know when your body or your mind is telling you to take a break. And I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to call you in. Anybody who's watching this or listening to this, I'm here to call you in. Sometimes I feel like the boogeyman just because I go into spaces and I'm like, ooh, dating violence. And it is scary because it is real, but I'm not here to call anyone out. I'm not here to, point fingers, because someone might be watching this and be like, oh shit, I did these things. I think I might be an unhealthy or even an abusive partner. And this information is also for you because self-awareness is the first step to holding yourself accountable and changing those behaviors. So I'm calling everyone into this conversation because this is becoming less of a taboo topic, which is fantastic, but there's still so much work to do. And I need everyone to truly be an ally in this work. And if for some reason you do need to hit pause, you do need to take a break from this, but you don't want to miss anything, just let me know. I'm always available to answer questions and to give you anything that you might have missed. And this link will be up hopefully forever until the end of time. So you can always come back and refer to things and skip through until you see something you want to know. So, healthy relationships, I keep saying that. So let's break it down. Who do we have relationships with? How do we build relationships? And what does healthy even mean? Since you were a wee little baby, all the way up until now, however old you are, you have had relationships. So I'm talking primarily about dating relationships in this, but let me be very clear that the stuff I'm talking about, especially when it comes to unhealthy and abusive behaviors, those things can happen in any of our relationships. So that includes our family and our friends and our coworkers and whoever, right? You have relationships with people because you are human and we like to have relationships. And we build those relationships by being influenced. I mean, think about your favorite TV show, even like podcasts and YouTubers and the media and advertisements. Instagram is crazy. I'm sure as I'm talking about dating, I'll get like a weird ad on Instagram about like couples or whatever. We build relationships not only by looking at the people in our lives, like family, who model those behaviors, but we're influenced by the media, by the things that surround us. So sometimes that is negative, sometimes that's positive. And I want to be very clear that when I say healthy, I'm not talking about perfect. Nobody is perfect. Nobody. Relationships that are healthy aren't perfect, and that's okay because we are imperfect people. And when I say healthy, I'm talking about actions and behaviors that continually make that relationship grow. So when we define the word healthy, there's three main things that I always tell people. Healthy relationships are based on equality, balance, and mutuality, meaning equality is that both sides of that relationship, all sides of that relationship, feel like they have equal say and equal choice. That there is balance in that relationship, meaning you are an individual person with individual needs and other relationships outside of your dating relationship, unless like you have like a secret lover. That's not cool. Don't do that. Balance meaning that you should be balancing the relationship with your dating partner and your friends and your family and your work and your hobbies. All that should be balanced. It's like having a bunch of relationship buckets. You need to keep all those buckets full. If someone is telling you to empty your friend bucket into your dating relationship bucket, that dating partner is not healthy. Break up with them. And then mutuality, meaning that people in that relationship view that relationship as equally important, but they also view the individuals in that relationship as equally important. Meaning they both people care about their relationship and they care about that person as an individual, which I don't think a lot of people think about, is that you are an individual person with individual needs and wants and likes and experiences, and those things don't go away once you start dating. And then, of course, those traits that people always think of when they think of a healthy relationship. So effective communication. Communication. I'm going to say it so many times because it is the cornerstone of any healthy relationship. And that includes fighting fair. In a healthy relationship, you're going to fight sometimes. It's normal to get annoyed. Everybody gets angry, right? But there are ways to fight fair, and I can talk about that too. I love talking about fighting because I'm pretty good at it. And of course, defining healthy means we're talking about trust, we're talking about respect, we're talking about honesty, all those things that should be equal, should be balanced, and should be mutual. And we're talking about boundaries, kids. I love talking about boundaries. I could talk about boundaries all day long. They are crucial not just for our dating relationships, but all of our relationships, and even including boundaries with ourselves. It's my favorite B word. Probably my second favorite B word. There's another B word that I like too. Moving on. When it comes to healthy relationship, when it comes to all relationships, you have rights and you also have responsibilities. So a couple things about your rights. This is just a short list. There's a bunch of other ways that you can have rights in a relationship. And when I say rights, most people think of like, the Miranda rights. Who is Miranda? Anyway, your rights mean that you are entitled to these things. Just being a person on the planet, this is what you are entitled to, just because you're alive and kicking. You have a right to privacy, both online and off. Again, you are an individual person. So if there's things you don't want to talk about, if you want to, you are allowed to post whatever you want on the internet, within reason. Privacy doesn't mean that you get to have like, a secret love affair without your partner knowing. That's not cool. But you also have the right to feel safe and respected in terms of not only words, but actions, because both safety and respect are what I call do words. You have to do things to make people feel safe. You have to do things to make people feel respected. You have the right to break up with someone for whatever reason, and that reason is your own, and you don't have to explain yourself. If the relationship isn't right for you, or you don't feel safe, or any of these rights are broken, then you have the right to break up without fear of retaliation. That is so, so crucial. You have a right to choice and to saying no. I love saying no. I say no all of the time, and it's so important in relationships. So many people feel afraid to say no, or afraid that a choice they make, their partner won't like them anymore. If you are afraid to do something separate from your partner or say no from them, that is a huge red flag. You have the right to be an individual. Like I said a million times, you are valid and you are important. So remember that the relationship with yourself is also so important, and you have the right to live in a violence-free relationship, free from violence in all of its forms, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But I said rights and responsibilities. So pop quiz, what is the golden rule? Yes, 10 points to the person who said it. Golden rule is treat others the way you want to be treated. Meaning, if you say that you have rights in a relationship, that these are your goddess-given rights for being on the planet Earth, then that means you flip it, right? If you're saying that you have the right to privacy, then you are responsible for giving your partner privacy. If you have the right to consent to the things that you want to do, then you are responsible for getting consent from your partner. It's just back and forth, right? The responsibilities echo your rights. If you want to be a healthy partner, then you are living out those responsibilities day by day. So I've talked a little bit about healthy relationships, but it's important for us to understand the spectrum of relationships. Relationships are not on a binary of healthy and abusive. There is that space in between, and you can see that because I figured out how to make a gradient on PowerPoint. I'll be honest, I don't like PowerPoint. I rarely use PowerPoint. That's why it looks like it was put together by like a 7th grader, but please don't judge me. But you'll see in that spectrum, right? It goes from that yellow to that red. So there are spaces in between where relationships can fall. So when we're talking about unhealthy relationships, I like to call it the breaks. So that's where we start to see the breaks in communication, whether people they start to ghost people, or maybe they're dishonest. Dishonesty is a break in communication, right? A break in respect, whether with words or with actions. And a break in the boundaries and adding that pressure. So if a healthy relationship has a solid foundation, an unhealthy relationship starts to see those cracks, those breaks in that foundation. In an unhealthy relationship, we see the struggle for control begins. Those are where our red flags, that gut feeling tells us that this isn't okay and this maybe could escalate, right? And then through the spectrum, we go to the red, to that abusive. Abuse is always about power and control over someone else. There is no other excuse for abuse. It's not because someone lives with addiction to drugs and alcohol. It's not because someone has an anger issue or needs anger management. It's not because someone comes from a home or a past where abuse was prevalent. It's not because someone has trust issues because their ex broke up with them and now they need to know where you are. Blah, blah, blah. No, that's all not true. Abuse is always about power and control over someone else. It is a conscious choice. And we see that played out using one of the 3 main forms of violence. And you might be thinking, I thought there's more forms of violence. And you're right. So I say the 3 main forms because like in the biz, that's what we call physical abuse, mental, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse. Those are kind of the big umbrella terms that fall into other forms of abuse, like financial abuse or social abuse. But I really want you to understand that you are a whole person. You are more than just your, physical body and your emotions. And abuse can happen in any part of your life, whether it's physical abuse, social abuse, emotional abuse. And these things aren't separate things. If your partner pushes you up against a wall, does that hurt you physically? Yes. Ow. Does that hurt you emotionally? Absolutely, it does. Can that hurt you socially if it's done in a place to embarrass you? Absolutely, it does. If you're a spiritual person, that can harm your morals, right? These things ripple out. Just like if your partner constantly lies to you or insults you, that hurts your feelings, that hurts your mental. But that also causes stress. And stress affects every single part of your body, the way you eat, the way you sleep, the way you think. Abuse doesn't just happen in one part of you, it ripples out to all parts of you. So that's why I really try to explain that to people, because people like to say, oh, they're not physically abusing me, so it's not that bad. False. If they're causing you stress, that is affecting your body. Ask any doctor. I am not a doctor, but kind of, right? So back to the spectrum of relationships. So abusive relationships is where we see what we call the blame shift. That is a term that most people, it's kind of self-explanatory, right? So blame shift is when, instead of holding themselves accountable for their abusive behaviors, that abuser will turn that around and blame the person they're in a relationship with. So, I wouldn't have gotten mad if you would have just done what I've said. Well, I wouldn't have had to throw your phone if you just would have stopped texting your ex. Well, I didn't know what you wanted. You were drunk, so you could have said no, right? So instead of pointing that finger at themselves, they're shifting the blame onto the other person to cause that guilt, to cause that manipulation. Isolation is probably the number one tactic abusers will use. And yes, it can look like moving someone to a different city, a different state, a different country. A lot of the times, it's isolating someone without even moving them physically. So saying things like, I don't like your best friend. She's always talking crap about me. Like, she never lets me hang out with you. I just don't like your best friend. Or, I don't like your dad. He's always like mean to me. He's rude to me. I feel weird at your parents' house. He's such an asshole. I don't like him. So slowly that person starts to cut ties with those other people around them, because their abuser is using their words, coercing them into isolation. And then, of course, there's no more boundaries, right? What the abuser wants, the abuser gets. And when I say boundaries, yes, I'm talking physical boundaries, but also emotional boundaries as well. So we define abuse by, it's always, always, always about power and control over someone else with intent to harm, causing fear and manipulation. And abuse has to happen in a pattern and in a cycle, which we'll talk about in a second. But I kind of want to backtrack a little bit. So what does this really mean? So can a relationship that is unhealthy be healthy again? What if you're the only one in your relationship that is trying to do healthy things, but your partner isn't putting in that work? And will an abusive relationship ever get better? These are really three big questions that I get a lot. And I think the best way to explain them is through understanding this cycle. So this is what we call the cycle of abuse. And if you've ever done any kind of like bullying training, this is going to look similar. So the cycle happens in 3 stages. So first we have that honeymoon stage, that honeymoon period, where everything is great. You start dating someone and it is the best thing that has ever happened to you. They're so sweet, they're so nice, you're so in love. Things also kind of progress kind of quickly. Maybe they're saying the L word pretty quickly. Lots of gifts, lots of promises. It's a great time. But then we slowly move into the tension building phase. And this is when those red flags start to appear, those breaks start to appear. But here's the thing about the tension building phase is that a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that tension is building because of how great the honeymoon period is and because of that manipulation. Saying things like, oh, I made them angry. It's not a big deal. I know they really love me. I know they really care about me. Or, oh, she was just drunk and she didn't know what she was doing. It's fine, right? because then we go into this explosion. An explosion can be just a one-time incident or a whole longer period of one of those three main forms of violence happening: physical, mental, emotional, or sexual. It's the attacks, it's the threats, it's that explosive episode. But then, because this is a cycle, right? See those little arrows? We go back into the honeymoon phase. This is what I call honeymoon part 2, because it will never be like the first honeymoon phase. Honeymoon part 2 is when we see those apologies and those promises. We're also seeing the blame shift happen. I'm sorry, I love you, it'll never happen again. Well, I wouldn't have done that if you wouldn't have made me so mad, but I promise I'll get better. It's all these fake apologies. So we see a lot of gifts, we see a lot of like makeup sex. This is when all that happens because the abuser wants to prove to that person they've hurt that things can get back to that first honeymoon phase, but it doesn't. And it never will, because this is a cycle. After the honeymoon phase, we go back to that tension building phase, another explosion episode, and then right back to the honeymoon part 2. So this cycle can happen over and over and over again. And this cycle can happen, once every 3 months, every other week, 12 times in a day. So if someone is living in this cycle of being told, I love you, it's great, I want to be with you, I don't really like you, and then an explosion phase, it affects every single part of their thinking process and the way they navigate their life. Now, I put the term gaslighting on here because gaslighting is like this buzzword that people keep like using and making like woke Twitter threads about. And I read them and I'm like, well, that's not what that means. Gaslighting is not, happens over a period of time. Someone can't just like immediately start gaslighting you. That's not how it works. Gaslighting happens within that pattern and in that cycle where the abuser completely changes and warps someone's sense of reality. So remember that blame shift, that person starts to truly believe that they are at fault or that they are the crazy one, right? And if someone truly believes that, their sense of self, their sense of self-worth is at a complete zero. And that's where we see that dependency start to happen as well. And this just creates barriers to leaving. And there are so many reasons why someone chooses to stay in those relationships that are abusive. We know on average, someone will leave their abuser about 7 times before they leave for good. But those 7 times can be stretched out over a long period of time, right? And I can go deeper into the barriers to leaving because there's a lot of really interesting things and intersections when it comes to abusive relationships and why someone stays. But I just think it's really important that we understand this cycle because this is what really causes someone to feel like they can't leave or things are going to get better. And this cycle is the way that an abuser traps someone into that relationship. So you might be thinking, you know what, this is all good and great, and this is all things I know because I'm a genius, but I just really came here to learn about sexual assault and consent. And that's okay. Just some things about sexual assault and consent that I want to talk about, kind of brief, is that sexual assault is a form of violence 100% of the time. If there is no consent, that equals assault, and consent is about caring. If you care about your partner and you care about your partner's safety, then you're going to get consent every time. When I go into a middle school or a high school classroom and I talk about consent, their minds are blown. They're blown. And I didn't learn about consent. I don't know if y'all had the same experience. I didn't learn about like consent or what sexual assault like even was in like the bare minimum terms. So I got to college. And we know that between the ages of about 15, 16 to about 22-ish is when someone is at the highest risk for experiencing sexual assault. So consent is something that we need to be teaching way, 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 way earlier. But point blank is that if you care that your partner feels safe with you, then you're going to get consent every time. And spoiler alert, I'm doing a whole other video about sexual assault and consent because there's so much I do want to say and there's so much information that I do want to give. So don't feel like, ripped off that I didn't talk about it so much because it's happening. Leave me alone. Don't bully me. So yeah, this was brief, pretty brief, And that is for a reason. I want to keep this line of communication, even though it's like just me talking, open. And there's a lot of things I talked about that I can talk more in depth about. And I'm going to tell you how to get in contact with me to get that information. Plus, no one wants to hear me talk for like 3 hours. I don't like to hear myself talk for more than like a minute. So I get it. So a couple of resources before I kind of wrap this up, that if you live in Bartholomew, Brown, Jackson, Johnson, or Shelby counties in the state of Indiana, Turning Point is your resource. So I've included the 24-hour, 24/7 helpline and our website. So our helpline always has trained advocates on the line. It's not just a bunch of random volunteers that we like get to work the phone. That helpline is not just for people who are in crisis. If you just want more information or you want to know how to help someone in your life, you can call that helpline and we can help you safety plan. We can help you give some resources. And our website is always up to date with what we're doing and more ways to get in contact. Both our helpline is anonymous and confidential. And our website is a quick getaway, meaning once you pull up the website, there's a big red X in the center or like in the corner somewhere. If you click that, it immediately takes you to like, I think it's like Google or something. So it's like you weren't even there. And just some other people and places. Love is Respect is a website I use constantly in my job. I borrow a lot from them. And yes, they are more geared towards teen dating violence. And that's something I teach more. But everything they talk about and all the resources on there just echo into, young adults and adults. Same with Break the Cycle. They do so much great work. And I also put Promundo on there just because they really focus on gender equality and making men allies and helping male survivors. Because abuse isn't just in, cis, white, heteronormative relationships. Abuse can happen in any relationship. Anybody can be abusive and anybody can be abused. So it's really important that we can recognize what that looks like and not use our bias when it comes to relationship. And of course, there are so many great organizations and agencies and coalitions across the country doing great work when it comes to intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and trafficking. So I encourage you just to look up your local or state coalition or agency. I know if you're in the state of Indiana, the Indiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence and the Indiana Sexual Assault and Human Trafficking. It's another acronym that I can't think of right now. Indiana Coalition to End Sexual Assault and Human Trafficking. Boom, 10 points to me. Those are our two big coalitions that do this work and really help be the pillar in our state as far as research and education and programming. So they have a lot of great information. So look them up as well. Questions. Please don't leave me math questions because I'm not good at math. I have a little brain. But I do want to answer questions. Whenever I do a presentation, I always leave a space for questions just because, this is supposed to be a two-way street. I hate talking at people. I like talking with people. So I'm leaving a link to a Google form that is for you where you can anonymously ask questions about anything I talked about today, whether it's abuse or healthy relationships, sexual assault, consent. If you have any suggestions for a topic you want to learn more about, drop it in that Google form, and I answer all questions to the best of my ability. If I don't know, I usually ask someone who's like smarter than me. But that's a space for you to use, and I appreciate everyone who's listening and watching. And I hope this kind of opened up your mind, or you learned something new. And if you didn't, you feel empowered to ask those questions because I don't believe in dumb questions if they're genuine questions. So please don't feel like you can't ask me anything because I'm here for you. I am the resource. So until we see each other again, be good and make good choices. And I will see you all soon. Okay. Bye.